It's 6:33, and I'm going to welcome everyone to tonight's Climate and Sustainability Committee meeting of the Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation. My name is Jane Potts. I'm the co-chair of this committee, and my co-chair, Keith, is out of the country. So one of our good team members, Mark Orrs, is helping me tonight with this meeting. So I'm happy to have all of you here tonight, and I know we're going to have some good information for you. As we start, I am going to read the land acknowledgement that we have. As residents of Colorado, we stand on the unceded ancestral lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Lakota, and Ute nations and peoples. These lands were also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other indigenous tribes. We recognize Native and Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of this land and our presence among their descendants who still dwell within it. We pay our respects to Indigenous and Native elders, past and present. So, all right, we've got you up, Merrill. Mark, was there something else we're going to do before we got started?
Nope, we're all set for Merrill.
Okay, great. Merrill, I think you're a co-host. If you want to get started, that would be great.
It said it's, let's see, let me try again. It said host disabled participant screen sharing. There he goes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so the slideshow. Okay, how does that? Can you all see me?
Could you put it in presentation mode? There it is. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Well, I am Merrill Kingsbury. I'm the Master Gardner Coordinator with CSU Denver Extension. There is an extension office in every, pretty much every county in Colorado. So there are 64 offices. And so extension is pretty much where the university meets the community, where the outreach arm of CSU, which is a land grant institution here in Colorado. And our offices, we really push forward the research information that comes from universities. So everything that all the information we give out is research-based. We just don't Google something and give you an answer from Google. Everything that we give out is either from CSU or another university. So our offices have, in addition to Master Gardeners and horticulture, we have 4-H, youth development, food safety and food preservation, agriculture and natural resources, community development, and much more. Obviously, here in the city, in Denver, we don't have agriculture. A lot of people here in Denver don't have cows. So we don't have an agricultural agent, but we do have a horticulture and 4-H youth development agent. So we have a ton of fact sheets and information on our website for you to visit. It's available to everyone. So this is kind of part of a presentation that I was asked to do by Jane that we do across the Front Range. Different horticulture agents and Master Gardener coordinators give this presentation to libraries and the public, different city and counties, things like that. So I'm going to give you a really very fast condensed version of some of this and the information that we share with the public. Some of this you may know. Some of it, if you could if you know it, pass it on to your coworkers, friends, people in your neighborhood, just kind of some reminders. It's really hard to be a woody plant in Colorado. Actually, it's really hard to be any kind of plant in Colorado. With our wind, hail, lack of rain, intense sunlight, we're closer to the sun than other states. We have alkaline, poor drainage, clay soil. Our temperatures, as you know, from this past weekend, go up and down. I mean, we were almost like 90 was it Thursday? To snow on Friday and Saturday. I mean, it's just insane. It's hard to be a woody plant. It's hard to be a plant in Colorado. So our summers are getting hotter and our growing season, while it's still shortish, is getting longer. When I was up in Fort Collins a couple of weeks ago, I talked with some research assistants in the horticulture department. And I'm always, we're always interested in the research that's going on to see, how what's coming out from the university as far as research on climate change or pollution, things like that. And they told me that one of the research associates told me they just can't keep up with climate change. Like once they get funding for a project, I mean, what they were going to test is it's already hotter. It's already, it's weirder weather. It's more wind. It's more, so they're just having a really hard time with our climate is changing so rapidly. They just can't keep up with research projects. Oops, is it not there? It goes. So trees are investment, as we all know. This is kind of the top reasons for the reason why having trees is good. They reduce stress, they improve the soil, reduce violence, bring people together, they support wildlife, reduce noise pollution, clean the air, they increase property value, shade and cool. So no matter where trees are planted, one of the things we always remind people is that once you plant it here in Colorado, this is not a plant and go state. It's a plant and care for the life of the tree kind of state. We just don't get enough precipitation. We have those temperature changes, intense sunlight. So if you are planting a tree, plan on, it's kind of like, it's going to be a pet. It's kind of treat it like a pet. You're going to always want to water it, make sure that it's taken care of in the winter, in the summer, wrap it if it's young, just set the tree up for the best success so you can have it live longer. The average street tree, I don't know the updated, when I was going to school, they would say the average life of a street tree, and it's, one of those coffins, we call it a tree coffin, like on the 16th Street Mall where there's a grate, it's like 2 to 3 years. So once you plant the tree, you want to make sure that it's taken care of. We see all the times, we get calls from landscapers that they planted a tree and then no one waters it on the property. So you always want to make sure if you plant a tree, even if it's on a public space, that it's being watered. Come on. Okay. So kind of tree planting 101 is what we preach. The correct way to plant a tree. A lot of people think that you have to amend the soil a lot, that you have to dig up way below the root ball. And it's really not true. You want to set the tree up for success. You don't want to give it false hope by amending it too much or digging up a lot of the soil underneath where you're going to plant it. Once the roots go out, if it's all happy and nice and cozy, and all of a sudden it hits like real soil, and then you've amended everything around it, you're really just giving it false hope. So you want to just kind of amend it maybe 5%. You want to have it kind of above grade, like you see here, and no soil on top of the root ball. And we actually have a great 2-pager you can take out to your yard with you as you're planting a tree. Come on. Okay. So we get this all the time. This is like the biggest thing that I probably preach about in the springtime is to remove all the extras around the root ball. No matter what the nursery has told you, even if it's something that says it's biodegradable, I wouldn't believe them. I would still take off everything, any kind of tree wrap, any kind of twine, rope, wire baskets, burlap, stakes, anything like that. Even if the nursery tells you, oh, it's fine to leave on, it'll just be, it's kind of like a kind of a death wish in the end for a tree. And unless you're in a really windy spot, like Northeast Denver, we really don't recommend, staking the tree when you plant it, unless you're in a really windy area or a place you think it's really going to be disturbed by, like in our park, we have volleyball once a week, and newly planted trees get beat up a lot. So in that case, we do recommend them being staked. So here's an example of, this picture just makes me cringe. I have a coworker that actually takes scissors and wire cutters with her everywhere she goes, so she can actually cut out around the trees when she sees something like this. So the root ball should sit slightly above the grade. That is what the newest research is showing. So like that's a perfectly planted tree. And that ensures when you cover it with mulch. So you want to cover it with 3 to 4 inches of mulch. That ensures that the tree is going to be watered adequately, and this gives the roots the most oxygen. You want to dig it 3 times the width of the root ball. The industry says 2 times, but CSU says 3 times. Any kind of circling or girdling roots need to be corrected prior to planting. This was actually Dr. Allison O'Connor. This was her linden tree She didn't prune it, and circling roots, and you could literally just move the tree side to side. It was so unstable, and it's just like a boa constrictor. It will absolutely suffocate the tree. So you want to shave the circling roots, and this looks scarier than it actually is. And if you have any question about whether or not you think you have circling roots when you plant a tree, just contact your local extension office, and we can tell you for sure whether or not if they're circling roots or it's just like kind of planted normally. A lot of containers we're finding from nurseries, trees are sitting in their containers for so long that it's inevitable that they have circling roots. So you want to cut off at least a ½ inch from the outer portion of the root ball. You're removing roots. It looks brutal, but it really helps the tree in the long run. So here's an example. And a lot of people think, oh my gosh, is this going to have, really stress out my tree? And actually it says, according to research, you can, remove up to 25% of the roots, but they must be watered properly following planting. And we actually have a fact sheet on care of recently planted trees that we give out constantly during the springtime. And it has a chart on, as far as how big the tree is, how much you need to water daily, weekly, for how long following planting of a tree. So considerations for woody plant selection. This is something that we spend a lot of time on up at CSU, really considering what are the best trees for Colorado, what are the best trees for the Front Range. If you think about it, there are very few deciduous trees that are native to Colorado. We really always push, native trees, but deciduous trees, we're here on the plains, and so not a whole lot kind of grows on the prairie as far as deciduous. So we have a lot of evergreen trees that are native here and not so much deciduous. We're always looking for species diversity along the Front Range within communities. No tree is perfect. So what you want to do is, deal with the flaws that it has. Like some of these trees that I'll show you, they have, 1 or 2 flaws. Like one of them gets leaf scorch. One is more prone to, keeping the leaves like an oak versus the other. So if you have just all the same trees along the street, they'll all have the same problem. So you'll all have the whole street full of the same problem. So you want to kind of mix it up and have different kind of trees within a neighborhood. So you're not all having the same problem at the same time. And God forbid, if you have an insect like the emerald ash borer go through a community, it won't kill all the trees. You also want to look at the water needs. You don't want to plant something in the middle of your yard that's going to drown, like a pinyon pine. Pinyon pines don't like a whole lot of water. You want to consider the growth rate. Is it going to be too close to your other trees? Is it too close to your house where it could fall in your house easily? Will it tolerate our alkaline soils? We get that question a lot. Will this plant, hydrangea loves, it's going to look great in my yard, but unfortunately it prefers acidic soil. And with our alkaline soils, it just won't survive here. Cold hardiness is a big thing. We get pretty darn cold in the wintertime. And even though we may get as cold as Minnesota, our soil freezes here. So whereas theirs may not as much. So you want to consider that, if it's going to survive the winter. And then mature size. It's easy to plant something and say, well, I'm not going to live to see it become to mature size. So it's okay that I go ahead and plant it, but please, consider the mature size for your house, for your home, for the future owners, for your kids. Really take a look at that and plan accordingly. All right, so for shade trees, I'm going to go over 3 shade trees and 3 evergreens. We have a great list called the Front Range Tree Recommendation List that we hope to update in the next year. It still has ash tree on it, and we don't recommend ash trees anymore because of the emerald ash borer. So we have numerous fact sheets on our website about different trees that we recommend for Colorado. So please don't plant ash trees, black walnut, os trees, tree of heaven, Russian olive, cottonwood, aspens, or others. City of Denver has a list of trees that they say please don't plant. CSU has a list of trees that we really don't recommend that you plant, and all of these are on them. And it's because of insect diseases. With tree of heaven and Russian olive, they can be invasive. Cottonwood, aspen, weak wooded, Aspen, they're so pretty, but they really just love the mountains more than they love Metro Denver. So the first one I'm going to look at is the Kentucky coffee tree. It's probably one of the most talked about trees at CSU. We just love this tree. It does really well. It's a tough tree. It does really well in parks. There's a few on the edge of Harbor Gulch Park that I've seen just thrive. They get really big, 50 feet tall by 40 feet wide, huge leaves. They look kind of gangly when they're young, but they grow up to be great trees. They, the fruit, they actually used to use it as coffee, as the pioneers did. We don't recommend that. It can be pretty toxic, make you pretty sick. So if you don't want fruit, there are few kinds. So there's espresso, decaf, and latte are the male clones that have no fruit. So you can't get this tree without fruit, which is pretty awesome. There's another picture of it. It's a really hardy tree. They actually used to use the wood for this. I read this today. Use the wood to make sleeper cars on the railroad in the 1800s. So the next one is English oak. That is another really great tree that we're recommending. 50 feet tall by 40 feet wide. It's a white oak, which means it tolerates our high pH soils and it's pretty hardy. The red oaks don't do so well here because of our alkaline soils. The leaves stay on through the winter. I think they're really attractive and they also sound really nice in the wind. They have a great branching structure. Don't need a ton of pruning. This is the tree in the spring coming out and then the tree in the winter. Great habitat for wildlife. Has the lobed leaves. Oops, I thought I had more slide on that. Ohio buckeye. This is a great tree. This is an example of a tree that is not perfect. If you plant it on the south side or the west side, like I unfortunately planted on the west side, it can get leaf scorch. But if you plant it on like the east side, or even, if you have a kind of sunnier north side, it does really, really well. So they're all over the CSU campus. I've seen them around town. They're at the Denver Botanic Gardens. My husband is from Cleveland, so it's his favorite tree of all times. So it's pretty kind of moderate growing. Mine's been in there for 14 years and has yet to really bloom. So it does really well. It has great upright flowers in spring. It has lucky fruit and lucky charm. But like I said, can get scorched if you plant it in too sunny of an area. And it does tatter in the wind if we get a really strong wind. But that's just aesthetic. I mean, it's otherwise it thrives absolutely really well. There's the flowers. And they say the flowers look tropical. They do look tropical. That's a fall color. Beautiful fall color. The fruit. Squirrels love them. So evergreen trees, we do have a couple of evergreen fact sheets on our website. Bristlecone pine, which is a Colorado native. It's very slow growing and is tolerant of very cold temperatures. It really is tolerant of most soil types. I wouldn't overwater it. Wouldn't put it in the middle of your lawn if you water your lawn a lot. Goes great in full sun. Doesn't mind the cold. The eastern white pine or southwestern white pine is more kind of common here. Dainty foliage and grows really well in high elevations. Also, people like it as a Christmas tree. I wouldn't plant it in a waterlogged area. This is Pendula, a variety that is a weeping variety, which can be really a nice specimen for your yard. It's a great choice for windbreaks. Pretty drought tolerant once established. Like any of other tree, I would recommend still, watering, especially winter watering it. And the last one is a white fir. Can get really tall. I wouldn't plant this in a small little area, small yard in Wash Park for sure. It'll take over your yard. Does prefer more moist soil, but I still wouldn't put it in the middle of your yard. And this is probably for a property that has a lot more space. And it grows pretty well up to 10,000 feet. So like a fir, they call it, friendly firs. It has nice, really soft branching, and the cones are actually vertical on this, which makes it really kind of different from the rest of some of the evergreens. So that was it. Does anyone have any questions?
Merrill, we had
Do
one
they
question.
stand up to
from-
the snow that we had just recently? The one that looked like it had leaves, branches going horizontally. It looks like the snow would cause that to break.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, this one, I mean, I would think this one would definitely be more tender. Usually anything weeping in our, and if you have a protective yard, you'd probably be okay. But if you had just like out in the open, no protection from any other, any other structure or any other trees, you might have some problems.
Merrill, we had a question from Adam Meltzer in the chat. Adam, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, Merrill, I planted a tree last summer.
Mhm.
And I don't think I planted it the way you were suggesting. I planted it from old information, which was kind of like a little bowl around the root for the water to go into. And it doesn't look like it survived. How do I know if the tree survived? And if it's still living?
By now, it should be at least, I mean, fully leafed out. If you're
It's
able to
not.
if you're able to kind of bend the branches and they break really easily, that means it's not alive.
Yeah, there's no leaves. I think it didn't make it, which is a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah. The fact sheet that we have on planting trees is updated probably at least once a year because they just keep changing. How just the research keeps changing on how to plant trees.
Then we have some questions in the chat about specific trees. One is from Susan Payne asking about honey locust.
Okay.
And another is from Carly Buckstein about hot wings Tatarian maple.
Oh, that's one of my favorites. I love that tree. It does so well here.
What's it called?
Tatarian maple has red seed, the red seeds on it in the summertime. It's amazing. It's a plant select tree. If you want familiar, I'm going to escape out of this so I can see you all. It's a plant select variety. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the, I was looking at the other day, I'm going to stop sharing, looking at some of the research that's been done on different trees that are holding up well to pollution and climate change. And that's one of the ones that's still kind of in the running that seems to be doing really well despite all of our changes.
And what about the honey locust?
They are, they do have their problems. They're not a perfect tree, just like anyone else. Others are. They're still on our, recommended list for sure. And I actually looking at the park people's list today. They're on one of the trees that they give out and sell as well.
We have a sunburst locust and we love it. It's beautiful. It's about 20 years old. Really beautiful in the springtime.
Yeah. And they have, I actually did a lot of my training in Boston in college. And so the Arnold Arboretum in Boston has some of the old school honey locusts where the thorns and the pods are just, enormous. So we have a lot of, fruitless or, podless now that are a lot better and thornless.
We have a hand raised from Mark Cerveni. Mark, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to go back to the honey locust briefly. I'm a little confused. I live on a National Historic Parkway here in North Denver on 46th Avenue, and it's lined with hundreds of honey locust trees over the years, double rows, in fact. And the city has been gradually removing these trees, informing us that they have I think it's a type of what's called canker or something that inevitably will kill all of these trees. Is that something that you could comment on? And is there a cure for this, or do you just replace them with something other than another honey locust? Thank you.
Yeah, I know, I don't know this for a fact, but I know looking out at different neighborhoods you can kind of tell, like I live in Harvey Park, so you kind of can tell the tree of the year when they were planted. So we have a ton of honey locusts, we have a ton of maples, things like that. So, you know, I don't know. I see Lindsay's here. Maybe she knows something about why they're removing all the honey locusts along the parkway.
I have just a little bit of insight into it. You're correct. It is a canker. It's called the Nectria canker. And they're limiting new honey locust plantings to no more than 10% of like an overall development project. And they're discouraging like the planting of too many new honey locusts in the city. So while you're totally right, Merrill, it's still on our list and we still distributed them this year, we kept our percentage to below that 10% of our total distribution, just to preserve the sort of inventory and diversity of the city and to not fall into that trap of like tree of the year and overplanting at any one time. So trying to like trickle it into the urban forest, but not overplanted in the way that perhaps we have in the past.
Great, thank you, Lindsay, for jumping in early. We have a question from Renee Arrington.
Hi there, Merrill. I'm curious if you could speak to salinity. We live in Lowry and we have a lot of non-potable water out here. And so the office, the Denver forestry guys have decided that a lot of our trees are dying because of the salt. And wondering if you might talk about that a little bit.
Oh gosh, unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot about it. Unfortunately, my specialty is vegetables and small fruits. So, I mean, I know there was a problem with raising the pH a few years ago in the Wash Park area. But as far as the salinity, I mean, obviously salt, you know, high salt is going to kill a lot of different, you know, things. But so is it like in a park where there's non-potable water or just all over?
Well, a lot of Lowry, it's part of the, you know, how the builders are developing new land now is they're trying to use more non-potable water. So it's in the places where this non-potable or gray water is being used. It's salinity is so high. Now that's what the forestry has decided is they've come out and looked at a lot of the trees and decided what's messing it up.
Yeah, but I know I have seen fact sheets from different parts of the country about how to, there are things that will grow in a little bit more salty areas, things like that. I don't know off the hand, you know, what would. So
They're pushing the coffee tree too, the Kentucky coffee tree.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to research to see what it kind of can tolerate as far as salinity and if there's been any research done on that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We can address that more later as well. From salinity, we have a question from Elizabeth Evans about acidity. Elizabeth, you want to ask your question?
Sure. Now you can see me. I live in Northwest Denver and I had a giant spruce tree come down in December in one of the windstorms. And recently I got a tree from Denver Digs Trees, a hackberry, and I planted it, I would say 4 or 5 weeks ago. And it has not leafed out yet. And I'm wondering if the acidity of the soil near that spruce tree could be inhibiting the hackberry from growing.
So it's kind of more of an urban myth that, you know, pine trees, evergreen trees make the soil more acidic around it. So it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference in the, you know, overall. So it might be something else, you know, going on as far as with the hackberry.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I think we have one last question from Barbara Kokovenis. Barbara? All right, I can read her question. What happens with the pyramidal oak tree that appears to have died on its upper branches? Can it be saved?
It's hard to say for sure. We get a lot of questions about this. You know, things are, you know, leafing out. I just had a question on serviceberry, the same thing the other day. Things are leafing out on the bottom, but not on the top. It could be due to drought, stress from last summer, you know, not watered enough, water too much. It's hard to tell, but a lot of times it is because of our weather stress. We really recommend watering year round, deeply, even when it's, Christmas time, if we're not getting a lot of rain or snow. And unfortunately, not just with the sprinkler system, they need to be watered a lot more than that. So it's hard to say for sure, but unfortunately, if more than 50 or so of the tree is gone, if it's just leafing out of the bottom, chances are it's really not going to be a successful tree if it doesn't have that main kind of top part, the leader. So it's just kind of a matter of aesthetics, how much you want to kind of put up with it before you have to let it go.
Great, thank you very much, Merrill. I see one hand raised from Bob. Bob, do you want to ask another question?
Yes, we found that planting trees, bare root trees, works very well. If you have the time as an old retiree, you can wait for them to grow up. But we've been very successful with blue spruce, with Oklahoma redbud, and a lot of these come from the Arbor Society. If you join, you get 10 seedlings every year free with your membership, and they come as a bare root. And if you give them 10 years, you have some beautiful trees. And their survival rate is very high.
Yeah.
Oh, good to know. Merrill, I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight. You're a wealth of knowledge for so many different kind of things, and you just really make it a happy, fun time to talk about what's so important to all of us. And we're going to be talking more and more about trees and areas that don't have enough trees in Denver as we do other things this year. So I thank you so very much. I'm sure if there's other questions that come up, I'll make sure I get them to you. I can just walk them over to your office now that you guys are open again.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. I enjoyed being here.
Great. Thanks again.
Sure.
Have a good evening.
All right, so that wraps up our first speaker for the day. And we got a little preview from our next speaker, Lindsay Cutler, who is program manager at the Park People. Lindsay brings to the Park People 18 years of experience in ecology and landscape design for private and government clients. The 8 years prior to joining Plant People, Lindsay owned and operated a small landscape design build firm in Denver, Colorado, providing ecologically sensitive landscape designs for residential clients. She also founded a school farm dedicated to regenerative practices. And prior to that, Lindsay worked as a field ecologist, conducting botanical surveys throughout the Intermountain West. Lindsay earned her master's in landscape architecture from University of Colorado, Denver, and a bachelor's in geography and environmental studies from UCLA. A lifelong hiker, backpacker, and self-described plant nerd, Lindsay is delighted to oversee the Denver Digs Trees program, which already was mentioned earlier today, Lindsay, and community forester programs, as well as various neighborhood-specific projects such as Greener, Healthier, Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. So Lindsay, thank you for joining us tonight. We look forward to learning more from you today.
Thanks, Mark. I have not read my bio on the website since I wrote it. So that was fun to listen to. I really appreciate that. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen here. I think that looks okay. And go ahead and see if I can't get that going. All right, are you looking at my notes or are you looking at the slideshow?
We see your slideshow, thanks.
Okay, awesome, thank you. I will minimize that. Well, I'm super honored to be here today. Mark totally introduced me, so that makes it easy because I don't think I have anything in the talk that I'm giving that mentioned even my name. So that's nice. Just thank you for having me, and it was really great, Merrill, to see you. I got my Colorado Master Gardener certificate. I don't remember how many years ago now, but Merrill was a huge inspiration during that program. And I just love extension so much and turn to their resources all of the time. So I just think it's really cool to be presenting at the same time. I'm honored. So For those of you that don't know us, the Park People is a 52-year-old nonprofit organization. We're a private nonprofit. We are actually a separate entity from the city and from Denver Parks and Recreation. We do work in close partnership with the Parks Department and the Office of the City Forester on many of our projects and programs, but it's a little bit of a common just misconception that we're part of the city. So we like to mention that. Our mission is to work with communities to plant trees and improve parks for a healthy, resilient future. And we like to call ourselves Denver's sort of parks and trees nonprofit. We believe that healthy parks help grow healthy communities. We believe that our community forest not only makes our neighborhoods beautiful places to live, but provides critical functions to the health, well-being, and sustainability of urban life. And we believe that all Denver residents should have access to these critical urban resources. And we also believe in the power of community action. I won't take too long here, but I do like to begin with a little bit of context. And I know Merrill hit on this just with the tree species that do and don't do well here. But we sit at a high altitude at the base of the Rocky Mountains. We're in a super arid climate, and the natural ecology of Denver is a shortgrass prairie. As you can see in this painting of the original indigenous communities and early white settlers in what would become the Denver area, that's sort of the Cherry Creek and South Platte there. Open spaces were abundant, but trees were not a significant part of the natural landscape. They were restricted to riparian areas adjacent to rivers and creeks. And so, of course, that's where we see most of our native species growing today. White settlement of the area brought about the growth of the city, industrialization, which was made for what was described as a thriving but ugly urban experience. And I think this picture was taken somewhere in the vicinity of the Valverde area today. In the early 1900s, Mayor Robert Speer began aggressively creating a system of parks and parkways, planting trees to bring beauty, recreation, clean air, and flood and fire breaks to Denver neighborhoods and make urban life more livable. His legacy is not clean. He displaced communities as he did this. So we do like to acknowledge that that is part and parcel with the legacy of sort of that City Beautiful movement. So Denver today is home to more than 700,000 people, with 2.8 million people in the broader, broader metropolitan area. And we're growing rapidly. We're actually growing by almost 1,000 new people each month. Many parts of Denver, as you can see from this sort of iconic picture here, have a robust tree canopy, and our city, like doubtless, has a wonderful system of parks and parkways. We like to call ourselves a city in a forest. These parks and trees function to bring important ecological balance to our built environment and to make our city more livable. Over the past 52 years, we have infused tens of millions of dollars into more than 50 park improvement projects in the city's public spaces. Many of these well-known places that reflect the history and character of Denver, and many lesser-known sites that also shape the experience of neighborhoods. And maybe just looking at this list, you recognize some of those from your local neighborhood parks. In recent years, while we still do park improvement projects and fiscal sponsorship of smaller, just sort of helping fundraise for community identified park improvement projects, we also have really emphasized urban forestry. We have 4 ongoing programs that support Denver's urban forest. We engage the community, individuals, businesses, and the philanthropic community in planting and stewarding the urban forest. And I'll go over some of those later on in this presentation. They definitely are just varied strategies for planting trees. And we hope that, one or more of them is sort of interesting and goes beyond a little bit Denver Digs, which we are sort of more well-known for than other programs. So Denver has 2.2 million trees functioning as essential green infrastructure. And these trees are the air conditioners in our city. And I know Merrill had a tree benefits slide, so I'm just going to kind of cruise through this one. They're serving the functions of a multi-million-dollar stormwater facility. They're filtering out pollutants from air and water, serving critical functions, mitigating and adapting to climate change by sequestering carbon and cooling and protecting the health of everybody in our city, including the most vulnerable people in our communities. They're protecting biodiversity, providing critical habitat. And then in addition to environmental services, trees also provide economic, health, and social benefits to our communities. People are willing to spend more time and money in business areas with nice tree cover. Landscaping, including trees, can increase property value by 20 to 30%. And studies show that trees support our physical and mental health by encouraging us to spend time outdoors and to have active lifestyles. Patients with views of trees and greenery have faster recovery times than those without views of nature. And finally, tree planting activities provide valuable opportunities for community building, which supports the social fabric of our communities and our capacity to cope with and adapt to challenges. But Denver's forest still has a long way to go. We're only 60% stocked, and that's actually declining. The new data that's coming out right now has shown overall throughout the city a 2% decline in the last 2 years, and we actually think that that decline could be much larger. The forest, according to the sort of 2014 data, is 60% stocked. The effects of rapid population growth are outpacing our tree canopy. And the emerald ash borer, an invasive pest, was found in Colorado and is encroaching on Denver, threatening our ash trees, which make up 1 in 6 trees in the city. That will ultimately be a huge loss of 330,000 trees. And part of the loss of tree canopy in the city is due to the selective removal of ash trees in anticipation of the emerald ash borer coming in. Our city foresters have done a fantastic job anticipating and planning for this pest arising. And one of the reasons we think that it hasn't been cited in Denver and hasn't caused this massive devastation that we've seen in other areas of the country is because of their proactive approach to managing and anticipating this. As we mentioned, Denver's tree canopy is inequitably distributed. This here is a map of Denver's neighborhoods showing the most densely forested neighborhoods in dark green and the lowest canopy neighborhoods in light green. You can see the disparity between the GES neighborhoods compared to the Country Club and South Park Hill. And GES is sort of shorthand for that Globeville, Elyria, Swansea neighborhood. Like many urban areas, we also see that with the exception of a few outliers, the wealthier neighborhoods, which have the big dollar signs, also tend to have more trees than the low income neighborhoods, which are the small dollar signs. And this relates to a history of infrastructure and policy decisions, displacement of people, and continued disinvestment in neighborhoods. Here's that same map overlaid with data showing urban heat islands, the absorption and retention of heat by the built and paved surfaces of our cityscape. So those same lower income neighborhoods, which are also home to many of Denver's communities of color, lack the tree cover to help cool and mitigate the intense heat that builds up over the summer and remains hot overnight. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that over the summers recently, is that it just doesn't cool off as we go to sleep, and it's very hard without air conditioning for our bodies to regulate. And this can be the exacerbating effect that can be lethal for those with existing health vulnerabilities. So the lack of tree cover in this low canopy neighborhood poses a stark visual contrast to this well canopied neighborhood. And you can see that on the thermometer as a nearly 15-degree difference, which is not just uncomfortable, but is actually dangerous to many members of our community. So to respond to that, as I mentioned, we've got these 4 ongoing urban forestry programs that I'll cover today, and we're aiming to engage the Denver community in planting and stewarding our city forest. And one of the things with trees, as we hit on earlier, since they don't grow naturally in this short grass prairie that we were prior to urbanization, each and every tree that we plant requires lifelong care. So it's partly about planting trees, but it's very much about caring for trees. One of our friends and partners always says every tree in Denver is on life support. And And knowing how much the temperature is projected to increase and seeing those days above 95 just skyrocket in our future, we know how important it is to continue to protect and grow our urban forest to mitigate this in any way that we can. So like I mentioned, it sounds like some of you here have Denver Digs trees. You know, the best known of our forestry programs is Denver Digs trees, primarily because any resident of Denver is eligible to request a tree through our program. We've been doing this for 39 years now. We're coming up on our 40th next year. And basically it's ranged in the number of trees that we've distributed, but on average, we distribute about 1,000 trees every single year. Every winter around January, we invite residents to apply for trees. You can find our application online, and we also do a paper application. We work over the next few months to coordinate event logistics, and we rely on the assistance of hundreds of volunteers and partner organizations to help make this event a success. Our goal is to make trees accessible to all. By reducing the barriers of cost, knowledge, and physical limitations. To do this, we offer trees for between $0 and $35, and we offer free tree planting assistance to those who request assistance from us. And we also offer tree planting and care workshops and send out tree care reminders 4 times a year for the first 3 years after you've received a tree. We also aim to decrease the tree equity gap by ensuring less affluent neighborhoods can participate. So these are our 28 focused neighborhoods here that are in green, and trees in these neighborhoods are $10 as opposed to the $35 that we charge in other neighborhoods. And we do evaluate the success of our planting programs in areas like Sunnyside. Used to be a focus neighborhood, and now they have been delisted. So that's a good thing in our book. It means they have enough trees that it's no longer considered a lower canopy area. We also aim to increase species diversity to enhance forest health and resilience against pests and diseases. We do focus on medium and large sized shade trees. And for me as a resident, it took me a big gulp to buy a medium-sized shade tree because it's a lot more palatable to buy something smaller, like a crabapple or a serviceberry, something a height and width we can kind of wrap our brains around. But it's really these bigger trees that maximize the benefits of shading and cooling. And if you take a drive down Monaco or 6th Avenue Parkway, you really start to see how trees are part of the architecture of our city and create these beautiful enclosures. And especially in the fall, it's such a pleasure to drive down those boulevards. So we do celebrate trees as inspiring elements of nature, and we just want to emphasize their beauty. I mean, we do spend so much time talking about all of the other benefits that they provide, but first and foremost, like, they're just beautiful. And we also do want to support residents in stewarding their trees. And like I mentioned, we provide free planting and tree care workshops. And we also do run a tree care hotline, which is really a volunteer that answers emails and phone calls. But if you do have tree questions, you can send us an email at any time and we try to get back to you. And we often use some of those extension resources. So thanks again to Extension. So Denver Digs Trees has become a fun community tradition and serves as a powerful point of community action with more than 300 volunteers engaging and supporting the program. We engage with dozens of neighborhood nonprofits and other neighborhood groups. And, we get out and plant trees in the neighborhoods. And this is a story we like to tell. I won't spend too long here, but you can see here, this is Nikki Montoya. And 25 years ago, she planted that Denver Digs tree that you can see there. This is 25-plus-year-old Denver Digs tree. It's a hackberry, which do, by the way, leaf out really late. So be patient if all of those signs of life are good. We're hoping those hackberries do leaf out. And she has written just wonderful testimonials about how this tree has created a sense of the street being loved and cared, and how it's really become like a point that her neighbors have coalesced around. And we love to show this 2-year-old Denver Digs tree that's right next to it and sort of emphasize what the power of planting a tree can be, and also the importance of different ages in the canopy. One of the exciting ways that we've expanded on Denver Digs trees to further support residents in low canopy neighborhoods is through these community-led greening events, which are where we partner with community leads who have greening projects in mind, tree planting projects in mind, and we help with neighborhood sort of visioning, designing, planning, and implementation. But we really take a backseat to the community's goals, and we're there to help, turn those goals and dreams into reality. We've done that, like Mark said, in Westwood and in the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea neighborhoods. And we recently were super honored to receive funding through the Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency group over at the city to continue this work over on Denver's West Side neighborhoods. So we're looking for community connectors and residents interested in greening their neighborhoods over in Barnum, West Colfax, Villa Park, and Valverde. So we've been doing a lot of sort of active connecting over there and just trying to get the lay of the land to understand, if those are priorities for the community, and if we can, lend our sort of tree expertise and resources when it comes to sort of time and trees and information and things like that. So we are really excited about this. It's a really powerful and meaningful way to plant trees. It doesn't get as many trees into the landscape as Denver Digs, which is like a big 1,000 trees, yay. This is more like 200 trees, yay. But we feel like it has so many more intangible benefits to it. So maybe some of you are familiar with our Mile High Tree Champions program. Through this program, we work with corporate groups to plant trees at parks, affordable housing communities, and nonprofit headquarters. Typically, the businesses staff these plantings. Sometimes they don't, and we open the plantings up to our volunteers. And while the bulk of our plantings have been at parks, we're always scouting for new, large, single-site planting areas to host these events at. So if you know of areas in your neighborhood, and they can be public or private, they can be parks, schools, churches, businesses, nonprofits, kind of those right-of-ways, as long as they're not under like big power lines or anything like that. We would love to talk with you about that and to see the feasibility of hosting a planting there. And we look for areas that can house like 20 to 50 trees. That's kind of the sweet spot we can do it in a half a day. It fits most volunteer size groups, but we'd love to talk further about that. And you can see here, this was at I believe this was the Columbine Homes and Affordable Housing Community, and we partnered with the city. So the city did the trees in the right of way, and we actually ended up doing all of the trees sort of on the internal and private side. So many good pictures. So the Park Legacy program here is a great way to celebrate a loved one. We sort of facilitate the planting of memorial and celebration trees in Denver parks. We have them planted in honor of a graduation or a birth or the passing of a loved one. And it's a really nice way to add trees to the canopy in a park and to have something to visit that should last multiple generations. It connects residents with our local parks and trees in a special way, and just allows you to leave a legacy. So we do run that program year round with 2 seasonal plantings, one in the spring and one in the fall. So our community forester program, I don't know if there's any community foresters here today, but it's a 5-part workshop series that is sort of a full-scale training in the basics of tree planting, tree care, tree pruning, tree identification. And then like that Trees 101 talks a lot about the urban heat island effect and the importance of trees in like the greater urban ecology. And then the final one is newer to the series, and that's the volunteer leadership and community engagement one. And this is important to us because this is a volunteer training program for us. So we are seeking to train sort of high capacity volunteers to work alongside us and also to work alongside the city. And these volunteers will go on to support a variety of activities such as outreach and education, neighborhood canvassing. We have like a high need for neighborhood canvassers in June. So if you're game to knock on doors, would love to talk with you further about that. Tree distribution events, school programs, site inspections, planting projects, pruning projects, you name it. And the way that we sort of envision this program growing is through neighborhood-based cohorts of community foresters that are able to actualize programs in their own neighborhood and work together. So we're starting to see it as a way to connect people with like-minded interests in their own neighborhoods as well. Almost done, you guys. I am really just honored to have you listening for so long, and sometimes I get tired hearing my own voice, but I do just want to emphasize the importance of our volunteers. We are a tiny staff. We now have 6 employees, 4 of which are full-time. And so often people think we must be this big group because of some of the bigger programs that we run, but really we rely on our volunteers to bring a lot of these programs to fruition. And we just have such a strong volunteer community. There's over 1,000 volunteers in our database, but what we'd really like to see is a growing community of committed volunteers out there. So if you're at all interested in volunteering with us, we would just love to talk with you, and you can get in touch with me at any time. So those are our 4 programs in a nutshell. And again, we just like to encourage you to get involved with our organization as an individual or with a group with which you're affiliated. And I'll sign off on this lovely quote from Gertie Grant, who founded our Denver Digs Trees program 39 years ago. People get connected to the earth, and they get connected to their neighborhood, and they get connected to each other. And it's that community building process that strengthens the neighborhoods and strengthens the city. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Lindsay. Our first question builds upon your volunteer statement there at the end. Jane, you want to ask your question?
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much. This is truly a way to build neighborhoods as well as to plant trees. Do you have any volunteer opportunities coming up soon that we can sign up for?
Thank you so much for asking. Oh, I wish I plugged that one. Yeah, like I mentioned, we are canvassing. So we have a brand new urban forestry program that I didn't even get to add to this presentation, and it's called Tree Force, and it's a workforce development program. We will be working with recently incarcerated individuals this summer doing a jobs training program in tree care. And the most essential part of this training is the hands-on learning using Denver's urban forest as our learning laboratory. So we are looking for residents of neighborhoods in Denver, particularly on the west side, just to keep things easy and close to home for us, who are interested in free tree health assessments, free trees, free tree planting, and sort of at a more limited capacity structural pruning of smaller trees. And to get the word out of these services, we have 4 canvassing events open to volunteers on Saturdays in June. So we typically get a group of anywhere between 5 and 15 people out, where we host a little training in advance with some speaking points. We provide all of the materials, and people kind of break into groups of 2 or 3 and walk the neighborhood, talking to residents, leaving door hangers on doors, and just getting the word out about these services that we'll be offering in August and September.
So how do I sign up?
Let me get the form and I'll pop it in the chat for you.
Oh, thank you
I
so
would-
much. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Great, yeah, I tried to find more information and I wasn't able to Google it. We have a question next from Barb DeSaro, and then another question from Bob Lorenz. Barb, do you want to go first?
I was just curious who you used to engrave the bricks for that Park Legacy program.
Well, I'll tell you, I feel like for one, I don't know the answer. So I'll just be super upfront about that. Diana Anik, who is our office manager, has been in charge of the Park Legacy program since I started. I've been overhearing her having sort of multiple delays, and I know that we can chalk a lot up to COVID. The company is back east, and they've been doing it for us for years. And I can certainly get that information for you if you want to. I'll put my email in here too, if you want to shoot me an email, and I can connect you with that.
Okay, thanks. We actually did find somebody locally that did a decent job for some bricks at GW High School. So I was just curious, but I'd prefer to do them locally. I thought maybe you had somebody else, but yeah, we used Mile High Memorials and they're in Littleton.
Oh, I'm going to write that down because I think we would prefer to do things locally as well.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Barb.
you.
Bob?
Yes, is it possible to, for Denver Digs Trees and the park people to work with schools? Maybe not with big trees, but just small little saplings or little seedlings that could be planted in a tree nursery on the campus and then gradually moved around the campus to landscape it with trees. Have you ever considered that?
I would love to consider that. I have to say we've typically worked with small trees, albeit bigger than what you're talking about. So typically we work with 1-inch caliper trees. We have worked with numerous schools. We end up finding that there's different standards. Like for most of Denver public schools, you're required to plant a 2 to 3-inch caliper tree, which is just not something that we specialize in. Sort of the private schools and schools that have community gardens for some reason seems to have exemptions, and we're able to plant smaller trees. I would be totally interested in connecting with you offline about the idea of planting saplings or seedlings and kind of look at that school property and that project to see if that's something we could mobilize around.
Well, I'm retired from teaching for 20 years, but there's certainly some teachers around that are still active.
Yeah,
Great.
we've heard a lot about Denver Public Schools, how there are a lot of people who are interested in planting trees and actually in funding the planting of trees, but that the maintenance staff doesn't have the capacity to steward and care for those trees. And that's something that we've been having conversations around to see if there's ways that we can plug in.
I see. Thank you.
Our next question comes by direct message from Cynthia Reiners. Cynthia, do you want to ask your question?
There, I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
My question, hi, Lindsay. So glad to see you in person. My question has to do with how you're preparing for drought coming in the future. You just have to look at California. That's like our future of severe limits on outside landscape irrigation. And I wonder if you have looked at any of the work by Brad Lancaster in Tucson of dryland water harvesting. I have an imperial honey locust, which is watered entirely by my downspout and the runoff of my driveway and some built check dams. And because I have that tree, I have a very large dry land that hardly ever needs any additional irrigation. The key thing is if you try to grow trees in lawn, then it's very, very hard to have targeted irrigation just of trees. So I wonder if you have looked at that whole science, and it is science, of passive rainwater harvesting.
You are saying sweet words, singing. I think there's an idiom or a metaphor about that. Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. I think those are such important parts and such important strategies that we can take in our home landscapes. We've done that personally at home, much like you're talking about, by building those check dams to try to create water lenses in the soil to store and detain the water so it doesn't just go into our storm drains. Rerouting downspouts is an amazing way to water our trees. Even with our 12 inches of precipitation a year, it is pretty impressive the amount of water and condensation and dew that can collect and condense on our roofs and go down our downspouts. And it is a highly effective way of watering our trees. We also encourage the use of rain barrels. And we're doing some active research with CSU Extension, the STEP program up in Fort Collins, to revisit the Front Range recommended tree species list with an eye for drought tolerance and an eye for trees that grow in areas that we project our climate will be more like in the future, such as northern Texas, the panhandle of Oklahoma, and northern Arizona. So I'm very glad that you brought that up, and you touched on something else important, that once you do have that mature tree established, your actual water needs for the rest of your landscape does go down. So just thank you. That was super valuable to bring up to the conversation today.
Great, thank you. Perry, you have a question?
I do, but first I just want to acknowledge these Merrill and Lindsay for the work that you are doing. Climate change seems so daunting and so impossible and so scary, and you both have so much knowledge about solutions that also create joy in the implementing of the solutions, and that's what we need. And also, you're a great illustration of the fact that if we can learn to ask the right questions, the resources are out there both to learn and to support the work being done. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. So my question is, and actually Cynthia just touched on one, I just struggle with, okay, so given wind and drought, what are we planting? You guys are working on it, and that's really encouraging. My other question has to do with this tree equity issue. And we on the the Inc. committee are really watching how CASR is spending its money and how neighbors are represented and how they're spending its money. And so the question is, what do you need? It's not just you need money for trees. When we think about tree equity, I love that, the tree equity gap. We can't just plant trees in GES and think, I mean, here in Platt Park, there are trees in the right of way dying and people don't have money to get up there and fix them. So when we look at how the money's being spent, in addition to buying the trees, what should those programs include for making sure those trees survive? Like what support do the residents need? What support do the neighbors need?
I think these are all the exact same questions that we're asking, and I've had conversations just in the last 24 hours, both with community members up in Globeville. They've been actively planting trees in Globeville since 2018, since we started that Greener, Healthier GES program up there. And this past spring, they planted an additional 72 trees, and they feel like they have the traction now. They feel like they have the connections, and they live there. Their grandparents live there. Like, these are, Globeville First and the Birdseed Collective are rooted in Globeville, and that's where their hearts are. And they know the grandparents and the uncles and the nieces, and they know how to talk to people about trees. And part of the reason that it's successful up there is because of the persistence and the rootedness of the organization in the area. And that is what has started to build trust, that trees are something that aren't just costly. You don't just get permits to have to remove a weed tree or to have to get fined to prune a tree. And, you don't get fined because your sidewalk's buckling. Like, there are so many reasons that people feel like trees cost money, and having that long-term relationship in an area starts to build that momentum. So I think one of the most important things with funding, and in talking to CASR, it's where I sort of double down as much as I can, is this needs to be sustainable and long-term. It doesn't need to be large, massive infusions, but it needs to have a presence, like not just 5 years, but 10 years, so that you can, an organization like us or Globeville First or the Valverde Neighborhood Association can have the right amount of money and the right amount of resources to keep going and to not give up. Because if we rely on volunteers, we're going to have burnout. If we come in with a different organization and different grant every 2 years, we're going to lose trust. And we don't want that. You know, we want to come and show up and listen and be responsive to communities' needs and have staying power. And so that's my pitch right there.
Thank you, Lindsay. As Adam notes, very well said. I think we have a related question from Christine O'Connor. Christine, do you want to ask your question, or would you like me to read it?
Sure. Thank you for these presentations. They're really interesting and useful. I'm just, musing about the fact that these last few summers are getting so hot. And I'm just wondering if the scope is really large enough. And you don't have to answer. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. Obviously, you would like millions more dollars. But how do you think the city could handle that in time to really turn this around?
Yeah, I think that's the question that probably keeps Kim and I up at night. And I think we tell ourselves that we're doing as much as we can, as fast as we can, and that it does feel like we've reached a tipping point, unfortunately, with our climate, but fortunately with who we are as a city and where our priorities are, and that the money now does seem to be spent in places that are addressing equity and addressing these decades of disinvestment. And while we know that we can't save the planet, we do feel like with every project, every tree that we plant, we're helping to make one person's microclimate and smaller environment just a little bit more tolerable and a little bit more resilient in the face of increasing heat. And so we can't say that we can solve everything. And we know that trees are just one part of a solution. I mean, we can't take the cars off the road and make everyone drive bikes and tear up all the pavement, all of the things we'd have to do locally and globally to turn back time. We know that if carbon emissions were to grind to a halt, the temperatures would continue to get hotter for the next 100 years. And then the pendulum would swing back for the next 100 years after that. And sometimes I think that probably does keep us up and make us want to quit. But if we can just help one house at a time, that's what keeps us going, and hopefully will help keep our city livable and maybe closer to a Santa Fe condition and not, Southern Texas or, something much, much hotter.
Thank you.
All right, Bob, you have a question?
We xeriscaped our yard about 20 years ago. And what we found out is that when the sunburst locust that has been growing now for 20 years has many babies all over the gravel and in our rock garden. After the recent snowstorm, I had to pull out 6 little sunburst locust sprouts that had come out of the rock garden. I don't know if you've dealt with this. You're planting trees mainly in grass, but trees planted in a xeriscape landscape that's 20 years old will send out seeds like Oklahoma redbuds. We started with 1 or 2 and we now have a dozen, and we love them. But we also pick up wild trees like chokecherries and what they call Canadian cherry trees that are volunteers. They just drift in with the wind. Have you dealt with this problem before, that there's too many trees sometimes in a xeriscaped yard?
Well, I think every year as I go out and tend to my own yard, there's a season for every weed. And sometimes they come from the cottonwoods, sometimes from the ash trees, sometimes they're dandelions, thistles, bindweed, you name it. I think if you're a successful gardener and you've cultivated fertile soil and there's water in that landscape for one reason or another, even in a xeriscaped landscape, you will have weeds that come up. And while we're not a city where trees naturally sprout up and take root and grow to maturity, I can speak from experience that I also get little tree saplings, and where I don't want them, I I pull them out, even though I don't think, well, who knows if they would grow up to be mature trees in the end. I just don't know. But I do know where I have no irrigation, I get very few weeds. So I don't have like a sort of educated response to that other than to acknowledge that, yep, tree seedlings definitely pop up.
Some trees like the chokecherry that are a native vegetation, they send out root sprouts around the tree. So you had one, but now you've got a dozen, and those are becoming a problem. So I just wanted to make people aware that trees planted in a xeriscape landscape can spread very fast, and they can, we're just living with them, but it's going to be a very dense forest pretty soon. And I don't know that with the people who started the xeriscape project really thought this through about what trees do in a xeriscape landscape. If it's irrigated, if you're watering that tree, it can spread by roots, it can spread by seeds.
Thanks for that, Bob.
Great. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Lindsay. We appreciate your time today. I think we've learned a lot of valuable information tonight, and I know you have some company at home, so I want to let you go before we turn to Brian Krenzer to make an advertisement for how you might be able to clean up a park and help plant some trees this weekend. So thank you again, Lindsay. We appreciate your time. We'll share this recording widely.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to advertise your event for those who may not be monitoring the chat?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, all. First, thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, everyone, for presenting fantastic content. Wanted to let everyone know we're doing a park cleanup at Chafee Park and Ciancio Park in the north side and Sunnyside. We're also doing, we're taking a survey around what do people want to see in their park. So if you want more trees, that is an option that you can go vote on. If you want to have a sidewalk around Chafee Park, which I know is a big popular one if you live on the north side, but we're doing a whole bunch of park survey information. As you said, to register, it is at denverparktrust.org/events. But we're doing a cleanup. We want to make sure everyone's aware and can come help. If you have any questions, feel free to hop into the chat or look us up on Facebook. All right, thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Brian. And there is a link there in the chat if anybody wants to learn more information about that. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. It was a great discussion, I think, and it's actually leading into another discussion which builds upon this. Our next meeting will be in July, and at that point we'll be discussing how heat islands are related to our tree canopy and problems with Denver. We'll have Linda Huang from the Trust for Public Land speaking, and she'll be giving an overview of heat islands and Denver's problems related to that. We'll have Mike Swanson, who is a city forester, joining us, and he'll address how Denver is trying to address this problem. And we'll have another representative from the park people who will discuss heat island areas of Denver and possible solutions with neighborhood partners. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we hope you can join us again at our next event in July, where we'll discuss the heat island in much more depth. Jane, do you have anything to add?
Just let everybody know that will be at a delegate meeting. So it'll be at a Saturday morning, and trying to remember the date. What is it? July 12th?
July 9th, I think.
July 9th.
It's July 9th.
Yeah,
July 9th in the morning. So plan on attending that one as well. Thank you all for coming tonight. It was obvious everybody was really very involved in the tree situation in Denver. You asked some great questions, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.